You felt it before it happened, the shift, the fracture in the air. Long before the noise, before the fallout, before the frantic messages and wide eyes, you sensed the pattern tightening. You said little, maybe nothing at all, but you saw it, and now it's here. The very thing they dismissed, minimized, laughed off as overthinking has detonated into reality. Voices are louder. Movements are sharper. Explanations are rushed and tangled. They're scrambling to regain footing on ground that was never stable to begin with. You're not shocked. You're not emotional. You're just unsurprised. That's what unsettles them. They can feel something changing. Not just in the situation, in you. While they spiral through confusion and reaction, you remain still, observing, measuring, almost detached, not cold. Just prepared, because this didn't start today. It started in the subtle inconsistencies, the tonal shifts, the small betrayals of energy. You tracked it quietly while they indulged comfort. Now the illusion has collapsed, and everyone is scrambling for answers. But you're not searching. You already did the math. And the real reason they're losing their minds isn't the event. It's that you're not. You've always noticed what others overlook. The pause that lasts half a second too long. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The shift in tone when certain names enter the room. While they focused on words, you watched energy. While they listened to promises, you measured consistency. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. You tracked micro-behaviors the way other people scroll headlines. Small contradictions, subtle withdrawals, overcompensation disguised as confidence. You sensed instability before it had language, before it had evidence, before it had consequences, and when you tried to explain it, they called it overthinking. They told you to relax, to stop reading into things, to give it time. But you weren't spiraling. You were calculating. You were mapping probabilities in real time, running quiet simulations in your head. Asking one question: if this continues, where does it lead? Most people ignore intuition because it's inconvenient. You didn't. That's the difference. You were willing to sit with discomfort long enough to understand it. You didn't need immediate reassurance. You needed coherence, alignment, truth. And when something felt off, you didn't numb it, you observed it. That kind of awareness isolates you sometimes. It makes conversations feel shallow. It makes denial feel loud. But it also sharpens you. You're operating from somewhere deeper now. Not just reacting to what happens, but anticipating what unfolds. Not trapped in the surface narrative, but aware of the undercurrent driving it. So when everything finally surfaced, it didn't shock you, it confirmed you. And that confirmation isn't ego, it's validation. Being right too early doesn't feel powerful. It feels isolating. While everyone else relaxed into comfort, you carried quiet tension in your chest. You noticed the cracks forming beneath conversations that sounded normal on the surface. You felt the instability building while they celebrated stability. And you had to decide, do you say something and risk being dismissed again, or do you stay silent and watch it unfold? Maybe you tried to warn them, carefully, subtly. Maybe you stopped, because you saw in their eyes they weren't ready to hear it. Either way, you stood alone with the weight of what was coming. There's a particular loneliness in foresight. You question yourself more than anyone else ever could. Late at night, you replayed the evidence, the tone shifts, the inconsistencies, the subtle withdrawals. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just projecting. Maybe I'm overanalyzing. You wanted to be wrong. Being wrong would have meant safety, simplicity, relief. but you weren't. And that realization didn't come with celebration. It came with a quiet ache. Because seeing clearly often means detaching early. It means grieving something before it officially ends. It means emotionally preparing while everyone else is still invested in illusion. They needed chaos to learn. You needed observation. That's the difference. Your isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation. While they bonded over denial, you were building emotional endurance. While they avoided discomfort, you were strengthening your ability to sit with it. You didn't collapse when reality surfaced, because you had already faced it internally. You had already wrestled with it in silence. And now, as everything begins to confront them all at once, you realize something quietly powerful. The loneliness you resented was training. And the confrontation they're experiencing now, you survived it weeks ago. They remember the moments they brushed you off, the subtle smirks, the polite nods that meant you're thinking too much. They remember how easily they dismissed the tension you tried to articulate. It was easier to label you intense than to question their comfort. Now look at them, confused, emotional, reactive, conversations overlapping, blame shifting from one person to another like no one wants to hold it for too long. The same red flags they ignored are suddenly obvious. The same instability they minimized is now undeniable. And beneath all of it, there's something else. They can feel something changing. It's not just the situation collapsing. It's your posture within it. You're not rushing to speak. You're not scrambling for explanations. You're not even angry in the way they expect you to be. That's what destabilizes them most. They anticipated an "I told you so," a visible reaction. Some form of emotional spike they could respond to. But you offer nothing chaotic to push against. Just composure. Just quiet confirmation. You're not gloating. You're not vindictive. If anything, you're measured. Observing the fallout the way you once observed the warning signs. And that calm forces them into an uncomfortable realization. You saw what they couldn't or wouldn't. The contrast is sharp now. Their energy is scattered. Yours is contained. Their thoughts are racing. Yours are settled. They're confronting the external collapse for the first time. You're confronting something deeper. Because while they scramble outside, something inside you is shifting too. And this is where the real battle begins. Before any of this surfaced, the real battle was already happening inside you. Doubt versus instinct, attachment versus logic, hope versus realism. You didn't detach in a single, dramatic moment. You wrestled your way there. Every time your intuition whispered that something was off, another part of you wanted reassurance instead. You wanted the comfort of being wrong. You wanted things to stabilize without confrontation. But truth kept pressing against you. You evolved through friction, through long internal debates no one else heard, through moments where you almost ignored yourself, just to preserve connection. It would have been easier to silence your awareness than to accept where it was leading. This isn't your final form. The war wasn't external. It wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about disciplining your own reactions. Teaching yourself not to explode when dismissed. Not to beg to be understood. Not to chase validation from people committed to misunderstanding you. You practiced restraint in private. You learned to sit with discomfort without broadcasting it. You let emotions move through you without letting them control your decisions. That silent self-mastery is why you're stable now. While they're reacting for the first time, you've already processed the impact. While they're overwhelmed by clarity, you're grounded in it. Because the hardest confrontation wasn't with them, it was with yourself. And you won that one quietly. When the truth finally surfaces, most people rush back into the noise. They want recognition, they want the apology. They want the moment where everyone admits, you were right. It's tempting to step forward, to replay the warnings, to collect validation like a trophy, to say the words that have been waiting at the edge of your tongue. I told you so, but you didn't. That's what makes this different. By the time everything collapsed externally, you had already moved forward internally. You detached before the collapse. You grieved before the ending. You processed the disappointment in private, so you wouldn't have to perform it in public. So, when the opportunity came to re-enter the chaos, to stand in the center of the fallout and claim your accuracy, you felt nothing urgent, no hunger to prove, no need to correct the record, no desire to reattach yourself to something you had already outgrown. Because you're operating from somewhere deeper now, maturity doesn't look loud. It looks restrained. It looks like choosing silence when ego wants applause. It looks like watching the storm without running back into it just to feel relevant. Most people go back because they still need something from the situation. Closure, recognition, control. You already extracted the lesson. You already adjusted your standards. You already recalibrated your boundaries. That's the turning point. Power isn't proving you were right. Power is no longer needing them to admit you were. Power is selective engagement. It's understanding that not every realization requires your participation. They're still emotionally entangled, trying to reorganize the chaos. You're already reorganized. And that quiet distance, that refusal to reinsert yourself into dysfunction, that's not weakness. That's evolution solidifying into strength. This is where clarity becomes power. Something about you is different now, and they can feel it. You don't over-explain your thoughts the way you used to. You don't rush to clarify every misunderstanding. You don't hand out the full blueprint of your mind just to make other people comfortable. Where you once filled silence, you now let it sit. This version of you is harder to access. Not because you've become cold, not because you've shut down, but because you've become precise. You've realized that constant availability is not the same as connection. That transparency without discernment becomes self-exposure. So you measure your words. You choose your timing. You reveal in layers instead of floods. They notice. Conversations feel different. There's less emotional leakage, less reactive energy. They can't read you as easily. The old triggers don't land the same way. The usual pressure points don't produce the same response. Access has changed, and when access changes, dynamics shift. What unsettles them isn't hostility. It's composure. It's the sense that you're observing more than you're expressing, that you're listening beyond the surface, that you're no longer performing your inner world for external approval. This is power in its quiet form: bereal control, emotional economy, observational dominance. You conserve energy instead of dispersing it. You respond instead of react. You disengage when something feels misaligned rather than forcing alignment. It's not arrogance. It's refinement. You've trimmed excess explanations, excess reactions, excess attachment to being understood by everyone. Now understanding is earned, and as your presence becomes more contained, more deliberate, more selective, something else solidifies within you. Power is no longer about proving, it's about restraint. They tell themselves they're upset about what happened, about the fallout, about the shift in circumstances. But that's only part of it. What's really unsettling them is subtler, harder to admit. They're not losing you. They're losing control. You're no longer predictable. The old buttons don't trigger the same reactions. The guilt hooks don't sink as deep. The subtle pressure that once bent your boundaries now meets something solid. You don't chase approval. You don't scramble to fix tension. You don't rush to restore comfort at your own expense. That destabilizes people who relied on your accessibility. There's a psychological truth most never articulate. People panic when their usual tactics stop working. When the familiar emotional leverage disappears, confusion sets in. They search for the old version of you, the one who explained more, reacted faster, yielded sooner. But that version isn't here. You change the pattern. And when one person in a system changes, the entire system shakes. Not because you attacked it. Not because you demanded control, but because you quietly removed your participation from its dysfunction. Now they have to confront themselves without your emotional cushioning. They have to sit with outcomes you once absorbed. This isn't rebellion, it's recalibration. Your restraint forced clarity. Your distance exposed dynamics that only worked when you were smaller. And as they grapple with that loss of influence, you're already looking ahead. Because this evolution was never just about them. It was about who you're becoming next. You didn't just anticipate the collapse. You anticipated yourself. Somewhere in the middle of the doubt, the isolation, the quiet internal battles. You caught glimpses of who you would be once the dust settled. Not louder, not harsher, but sharper, more contained, more deliberate, stronger, quieter, strategic. While they were focused on preserving what was comfortable, you were already imagining what growth would require. You understood that if the illusion broke, something in you would have to rebuild differently, and now you're standing in that difference. This isn't your final form. What they're witnessing isn't the peak of your evolution. It's the early stage of refinement, the version of you that has stabilized after impact, the version that no longer needs noise to feel certain. If this is you calm, imagine you focused. If this is you detached, imagine you disciplined. There's a quiet confidence forming inside you now. Not based on being right, but on being prepared. Not based on control over others, but on control over yourself. You saw this version coming because you were building it long before anyone noticed. And the more you step into it, the less you feel the need to announce it. You don't have to declare growth. You embody it. Now there's no surge of revenge in you, no desire to watch anyone burn for doubting you. Just stillness. You saw it coming. You prepared in silence. You endured the isolation without applause, without backup, without certainty that anyone would ever understand. And now they're losing their minds. You're gaining clarity. While they scramble for explanations, you're refining direction. While they replay the past, you're recalibrating the future. The chaos that destabilizes them has already shaped you. You weren't paranoid, you weren't dramatic, you were early. And early thinkers move differently. They absorb impact before it arrives. They detach before collapse. They evolve before permission, so you stand here now, calm, certain, unshaken, not because nothing happened, but because you already transformed when it did. That's the power of restraint. That's the discipline of evolution.